I am live. Hello, good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, or good whatever time of night or day it happens to be, wherever you happen to be. Welcome to Republic News. I'm your hostess, Liviana. This is the 5th episode of my Post Saints show, and this episode is titled, Austerity is Murder. As usual, I will be going over some theoretically recent news, not always recent. Sometimes I find stuff from further back that might be of interest. And tonight I will actually be reading a few things from a couple of years ago, but as well as more recent news, of course. But the things I'll be reading from a couple of years ago are relevant. And I'm also going to be reading an article that was written in 1946, which is extremely relevant to our present economic system and situation. So, with that out of the way, I'm going to pop out the chat here so I don't have to run the video at the same time as the stream video, and that way I can see your comments without having to have the live video open, and we'll just have the video showing in my dashboard. So with this introduction out of the way, I'm going to hop in to the stories. So this article comes from NPR, National Public Radio. It was published on the 15th of January, and it is about UK rejects Theresa May's Brexit deal in pivotal vote. This was written by Colin Dwyer and Vanessa Romo. So I'm sure that most of you already know that the Parliament rejected Theresa May's Brexit deal. Let's see here. With the UK fast approaching the March 29th deadline for when it will leave the European Union, the prospects for an orderly, on-time Brexit, or even any Brexit at all, have dimmed considerably. On Tuesday evening, British lawmakers rejected the deal Prime Minister Theresa May had reached with the EU, opening a Pandora's box of possible outcomes to be considered in the weeks to come. And the result of the critical vote wasn't even particularly close. Just 202 members of Parliament sided with May's plan, while 432 cast votes to kill the proposal. It was the biggest defeat for a British government in Parliament in modern times. Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the opposition Labour Party, has proposed a motion of no confidence in May's government, which will be debated and put to a vote on Wednesday. Now, that did happen, and somehow the woman actually won that vote. The no confidence vote did not succeed, and I'm utterly gobsmacked by that, but at any rate, so, if you, I think I read most of that article. I think there's like one paragraph left or something. But if you want to look at it yourself, it will be included in the video description. A link for all the articles I read will be included in the video description. Probably before the stream ends, assuming there be no technical issues between now and then, which do unfortunately sometimes happen either on YouTube's end or on my ISP's end or on my connections end, and even occasionally Windows decides it wants to update spontaneously, or my antivirus decides, hey, I think it's time to run a rootkit scan, and I'm like, oh god, no. But anyway, hopefully none of that will happen tonight. So the next article, I'm not really going to talk about that one. I did make a couple of comments about things that have happened since then. The next article that I have from recent times comes from, well, I'm not entirely sure where this comes from. Let me see. Oh, it comes from Ars Technica, right? It was published on the 14th, written by Cyrus Farivar. Feds forcing mass fingerprint unlocks is an abuse of power, judge rules. And it has a subtitle, quote, quote, apparently from the judge, citizens do not contemplate waiving their civil rights when using new technology, end quote. So, according to a new ruling issued last week by a federal magistrate in Oakland, California, the government can't get a warrant granting permission to turn up at a local house allegedly connected to a criminal suspect, seize all digital devices, and force anyone found at the house to use biometrics to try to unlock those devices. The 9-page order, which was issued on January 10 and was first reported by Forbes on Monday, involves a criminal case that is otherwise sealed. There is a lot that remains unknown about the particulars, including the names of the suspects, why federal authorities believe that the two suspects committed extortion via Facebook Messenger, and what Oakland House is involved. U.S. Magistrate Judge Candace Westmore found that the government request here, quote, runs afoul of the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, end quote, which protect against unreasonable search and self-incrimination, respectively. She continued, noting that the government request was, quote, overbroad, end quote. And let's see here. She wrote, quote, the government cannot be permitted to search and seize a mobile phone or other device that is on a non-suspect's person simply because they are present during an otherwise lawful search, end quote. Blake Reed, a law professor at the University of Colorado, told ours that it was a positive step that another judge was understanding the possible ramifications of allowing the government to rifle through someone's phone. He emailed, quote, accessing people's phones is, in my opinion, much more like accessing the contents of their brains than it is the contents of their file cabinet, end quote. Multiple times, Judge Westmore cited a 2018 Supreme Court decision known as Carpenter, which found that law enforcement needs a warrant to obtain more than 120 days of cell site location information. Let's see, she wrote, citing the Carpenter opinion, quote, citizens do not contemplate waiving their civil rights when using new technology, and the Supreme Court has concluded that to find otherwise would leave individuals at the mercy of advancing technology, end quote. This goes on for a few more, maybe three or four more paragraphs. And so if you want to read the full article, again, it will be linked in the video description. You can check that out later. This is certainly a good development for civil liberties and constitutional rights. The government has certainly overreached its authority several times and has often attempted to use the USA Patriot Act as an excuse for some of these excesses. But good on this judge, Candace, for slapping them down on that. Okay, so my next article is also from NPR. And it was published on the 16th of January. It's by Christine Wilmson and Martha Bebinger. Massachusetts Attorney General implicates family behind Purdue Pharma in opioid deaths. So, the Sackler family behind Purdue Pharma knew that its painkiller OxyContin was causing overdoses, yet continued to cash in as deaths mounted, the Massachusetts Attorney General alleges in court documents filed Tuesday. In a new 274-page memorandum, Attorney General Maura Healey details a chain of command that she alleges implicates 8 Sackler family members, as well as 9 Purdue board members or executives in the nation's deadly opioid epidemic. An earlier version of the memo, filed on the 21st of December, was more than half redacted after Purdue Pharma argued to withhold information about the Sacklers, one of the richest families in the United States. Some sections remain blacked out in Tuesday's filing. The new memo spells out Healey's allegations that the Sacklers flooded Massachusetts with sales reps, influenced state legislation, and financially backed medical facilities and universities so that they could tout Purdue opioids. Healey describes former Purdue chairman and president Richard Sackler as a micromanager obsessed with profits in Massachusetts and the rest of the country. Tracking national sales, Sackler demanded that he travel to doctors' offices alongside reps and complained advertising about the opioids wasn't as positive as he wanted. Internally, executives worried about Sackler's promotion of opioids, according to Healey. Sackler wasn't satisfied with Purdue Pharma's sales in 2011, the documents allege. Let's see. A quote, after 1 week of prescriptions doubled Purdue's forecast, Richard, that is Richard Sackler, wrote to the sales staff, I had hoped for better results, end quote. That year, Massachusetts sales reps pushed doctors to prescribe Purdue Pharma's opioids more than 1,000 times to elderly patients with arthritis, the memo says, but Sackler wanted more. One sales rep was ordered to increase prescriptions by 62% in Massachusetts. Purdue also threatened to fire 2 reps in Massachusetts because the physicians they visited hadn't written enough opioid prescriptions, Healey says. And this goes on for actually another page or so, or maybe even longer. But anyway, I think you get the gist of the story. Yeah, it goes on for 2 or 3 more pages, actually. I think you get the gist of the story without me reading the entire article. And again, if you want to read the article for yourself in its entirety, it will be included in the video description. A link will be included in the video description. So, I'm going to be talking about this a little bit more, not this particular case, but in general, in a few, as I talk about another article that I have for you this evening. So, moving on, yes. So, there is, of course, a lot of noise being made about people who are or may be running for president in 2020. Some have already declared their candidacy or announced their candidacy. Some have opened exploratory committees to look into running, and there is quite a bit of speculation about several other people who have not yet made any announcement or declared anything, but who are widely believed to be intending to run in 2020 on the Democratic Party ticket for the Democratic Party's nomination for president. So, this article that I have at the moment is about one of those potential candidates. I don't believe he's announced or formed an exploratory committee yet, but Cory Booker, whom I have often described as a progressive opportunist, is the subject of this article, which comes from The Intercept. It was published on the 12th of January. This is from 2017, actually, so it's not quite 2 years. Oh, it's about 2 years old, yeah. And it's by Zaid Gilani and David Dayan, or Dayan. I'm not sure how to pronounce this guy's last name, so, I mean, if he wants to contact me and let me know, I will then know how to pronounce his last name, but D-A-Y-E-N. I'm going to say Dayan, because I don't know. And so, back in 2017, apparently, in January, Bernie Sanders introduced a very simple, symbolic amendment Wednesday night, urging the federal government to allow Americans to purchase pharmaceutical drugs from Canada when they are considerably cheaper. Such unrestricted drug importation is currently prohibited by law. And, you know, a lot of establishment Democrats and their sycophants on Twitter and elsewhere have been whining about how the Bernie people are launching personal attacks on poor Beto O'Rourke, or Robert Francis O'Rourke, as is his actual name, or having personal attacks against Kamala Harris or blah, blah, blah. You know, I've said on Twitter and Facebook a few times recently, I'm not sure when looking at someone's record, you know, what they've actually voted for in the past and their policies and their practices when they've held other positions of elected office. I'm not sure how that constitutes a personal attack. I'm not sure when the Democratic Party establishment decided that such investigation constituted a personal attack. You know, ordinarily when you want to personally attack someone, you talk about, you know, how their complexion makes them look orange, or their hairdo looks like a comb over or a toupee, or calling them stupid, or, you know, something like that. That would be a personal attack. But looking at someone's record to see what they've actually done in the past, to see how they've performed, that's not a personal attack. Okay, so let's just look at this here. This article is actually called "Cory Booker Joins Senate Republicans to Kill Measure to Import Cheaper Medicine from Canada." A lot of people think Cory Booker is a progressive. Cory Booker is not a progressive. Neither is Kamala Harris, neither is Beto O'Rourke, neither are most of the people that are being called progressives by the Democratic Party establishment. Okay, guys, it's not just a fucking marketing gimmick. It's not an advertising gimmick. Progressive actually has a meaning. It doesn't mean just whatever you want it to. It has a meaning. I've talked about this at length in several videos and articles and so forth. So, I mean, certainly you can check out the body of my work here and on the Progressive Flame and at Real Progressive's website and see some of the things that I have said about what does it mean to be a progressive? What is the difference between a progressive and a partisan progressive and a progressive opportunist and a regressive outrage monger? Because there are, in fact, at least 3 or 4, depending on how you want to divide them, at least 3 or 4 different camps in the United States today who are trying to claim the name progressive, only one of which has any actual, what you might call, apostolic succession from the historical progressive movement. And Cory Booker ain't part of that, and neither is Kamala Harris, and neither is Beto O'Rourke, or most of these other people. Now, there is Tulsi Gabbard, whom I will certainly consider to be at least partially in the modern progressive camp. She certainly is an intelligent, concerned person, but we're going to talk about Cory here. So, as I said, Bernie Sanders, back in January 2017, introduced a symbolic amendment to allow Americans to purchase pharmaceutical drugs from Canada, where they are considerably cheaper. Now, you know, I mean, it's Canada we're talking about. It's not some no-name company in a third world country that makes pharmaceuticals out of beetle shit or something, you know, and claims that they are the same as the drug that you're buying in the United States. This is Canada. Okay, it's not Mexico, it's not, you know, Cambodia, or, you know, I don't know, but it's you know, they have their strict controls and stuff there too. The policy has widespread support among Americans. One Kaiser poll taken in 2015 found that 72% of Americans are in favor of allowing for importation. President-elect Donald Trump also campaigned on a promise to allow for importation. The Senate voted down the amendment 52-46, with 2 senators not voting. Unusually, the vote was not purely along party lines. I don't know why they think this is unusual. 13 Republicans joined Sanders and a majority of Democrats in supporting the amendment, while 13 Democrats and a majority of Republicans opposed it. One of those Democrats was New Jersey's Cory Booker, who is considered a rising star in the party and a possible 2020 presidential contender. In a statement to the media after the vote, Booker's office said that he supports importation of prescription drugs, but that, quote, any plan to allow the importation of prescription medications should also include consumer protections that ensure foreign drugs meet American safety standards. I opposed an amendment put forward last night that didn't meet this test, end quote. This is Canada, motherfucker. It's not, it's not like, Karen Island or something, okay? We're talking about Canada, you dumb motherfucker. Oh my God. So anyway, I'm not going to read all of this article either, of course, but, you know, again, if you want to read it, the link will be in the video description. I think this is pretty typical for Cory Booker's voting record, actually. Oh my God. So, I mean, sure, go ahead and check that out, because it is important that you know who these people are and know what their records are, how they've voted in the past, what sorts of things they've done, and so on and so forth. Now, we're going to talk about yet another potential candidate. I'm not sure, she may have actually announced by now. I think she had certainly started an exploratory committee to look into running for president. And this is Kamala Harris. So this article is from, let's see. Oh yeah, this is from the 10th of January this year, 2019. And it was published in Naked Capitalism and nakedcapitalism.com. I think they actually have a different name for the website. Let me see here. What is it called? Well, poo, I know it's here somewhere. No, it's just called Naked Capitalism. Okay. So that's fine. Let's see here. So this article was published on the 10th. It's by Yves Smith, I'm not sure, Y-V-E-S, Ives, St. Ives, right? Or Eve if it were a French name, but I mean with the surname like Smith, probably not. So I don't know. Kamala Harris tells big lie that 2012 mortgage settlement was a good deal for homeowners. Oh, really? The big whopper season is already upon us as the form of presidential aspirants telling egregious lies about their track records. The Wall Street Journal tonight covers a section from Kamala Harris's new book, in which she touts what a great deal she got for California homeowners in the so-called federal 49-state national mortgage settlements in 2012. The officials who played meaningful roles in the mortgage settlement negotiation should be run out of public life. Wait, what? The officials who played meaningful roles in the mortgage settlement negotiation should be run out of public life rather than failing upwards as Harris has. Hopefully the millions who lost their homes to foreclosure will vigorously oppose her presidential bid, but being a successful politician apparently means having no sense of shame. So there's a little link to a background and stuff, and why the national mortgage settlement was a bank enrichment scheme at the expense of homeowners and the general public. In fact, as we and many others like Dean Baker, Matt Stoller, David Dian, Marcy Wheeler, Tom Adams, and Abigail Field recounted at the time, the settlement was a sellout to banks, a, quote, get out of liability almost free, end quote, card, due to widespread and probably pervasive corners cutting during the mortgage securitization process. It appeared that the overwhelming majority of mortgages that had been securitized since the refi boom of 2003 had not had the mortgages conveyed to the securitization trusts as stipulated in the pooling and servicing agreements that governed these deals. Because these deals were designed to be rigid for the about 80% that elected New York law to govern the trust, there was no way to straighten out these securitizations after the fact. Georgetown law professor called these agreements Frankenstein contracts, and argued that what had happened was securitization fail, that the securitizations had never been properly formed, and thus the investors had bought what amounted to legal empty bags. Mind you, someone did have the right to collect the interest and principal on behalf of the securitization. Nevertheless, in an early manifestation of what Lambert later called code is law, everyone acted as if things had been done correctly, and weirdly, this might never have become a problem were it not for a tsunami of foreclosures. The only secret of mortgage servicing was it had been set up to be a high-volume, highly routinized business, which it could be if servicers were dealing with on-time payment. But every time a servicer had a portfolio with a lot of delinquencies and defaults, it wound up engaging in a lot of fraud because it wasn't paid enough to foreclose well, and certainly not enough to modify mortgages, as banks had done as a matter of course back in the Stone Ages when they kept mortgages on their books. The securitizers and servicers all acted as if they could do the paperwork needed to convey the mortgage to the trust properly if and when they needed to foreclose. The wee problem with that was that for a whole bunch of good legal reasons we won't bore you with, but we covered in gory detail back in the day, the mortgages had to have gotten to the trust by a date certain, which was inevitably well before the foreclosure. Only a time machine could fix this problem. Servicers and foreclosure lawyers engaged in all sorts of creative frauds to try to make everything look okay, but with servicing so automated, botched, and too often deliberately abusive, quite a few of the people being foreclosed upon were ones who should have been salvaged. It would have been better for everyone, the investors, the homeowners, and the communities, except for those services. Well, there was another bad incentive that we'll get to in a minute. And many of the people who were foreclosed upon had missed only a payment or two, or would have been able to remain current